Well, we got pictures coming in from Tony, Anthony. So,
Nice.
I know, I have never called him that. So, Tony's sending us pictures.
I call
It just says Tony Letourneau on my phone. So,
My name is Anthony Letourneau. I'm the character designer and concept artist for the Cloudspire series. So the design process took about 2 years from start to finish. We started early in 2017 and didn't wrap up for a whole another 2 years. The story itself, the universe itself, the ideas about how this world was going to be constructed was actually being built in parallel by a writer along with me and in a separate studio designing characters, designing structures, designing the world. And so we would have to we wouldn't meet together often. The writer and myself wouldn't often meet together. Josh was the kind of the go-between, and he would decipher the worlds that Ryan was beginning to flesh out. He would parse it down and then give it to me.
I was picturing, if, when they go into battle, like that they almost have something, again, I'm not an artist, so, Anthony is much better at this stuff than I am, but like that they almost have like kind of like a suit that has like holes built into it, like
sure. Yep.
This is their back, but like to kind of have, it's molded to like for them to be able to use that stuff.
Right.
He has in his mind some kind of universe, but he'll give me a broad definition of that. We need a giant. We need natural characters and creatures that are in like a forest. And that's it. And he'll just generally allow me that creative latitude to explore. And then I will come back to him with those early rough sketches, and he'll either like them or he'll make edits. And a lot of times what will happen is I'll go in an entirely different direction, just feeling how I think this character could go. And then that will spin itself back into the characters that get introduced into the game.
There's a piece of me that when we first started this project, we were like, okay, what are we gonna shoot for? Are we pushing for more of a like a Game of Thrones edginess to the to the characters, and like I know that we were talking more about that for faction types originally, but then we pulled back from that with the art style. We talked a little bit about that, a little bit wider brush strokes with like the Game of Thrones examples, and I think that's closer to what we're at now.
Yeah.
So there's a part of me that's hanging on to this.
Yes, me
because
too.
it has that little bit more of a punch, and I don't want to get too.
So it's only for me
Sherwood Forest or like
exactly.
Enchanted Forest type.
Yeah.
Like, do you know
Yes,
kind
I
of
do,
what I'm
exactly.
like?
When we are brainstorming and coming up with ideas for the project, it's very broad sketches. Generally, Josh and Adam together will pitch to me, primarily Josh, but Adam's involved in the concepts as well. Just ideas of the game, where they want to go with it, what type of the feeling of the world they want to communicate, if it's going to be tech involved, if it's going to be natural elements. Very rarely do they interject any type of color palettes or anything like that. They're just mostly giving me their impressions about this world they want to be part of.
That's
Giant berserkers.
Yeah. So I can see how that would. This is helpful for ideas, because like if you set him to go, you have absolutely no control where he goes. He just starts running in a direction for a certain amount of space, and the only thing that would stop him would be a tower on the map. Like he'll run through paths, through forests, through mountains, but like you can't control him very well. So you kind of got to use him when he goes in the direction that you want him to, but all the other times he's just going, nuts. So that kind of an idea would be really fun to have, and use. Those might be the biggest of the giants.
It's interesting that as I do character design, how often people I know, either as a whole or in parts, appear in the different games. My granddaughter appears in as a portal seeker. She is actually the one little portal seeker. He's got the helmet on, so as part of that expansion collection. So every time I pull that game out, she gets to find that chip. So yes, things like that. I every once in a while will sneak myself into a game or certain angles or certain pieces. You'll have to find out which one in the game would be me, but I think it's pretty clear.
That guy kind of looks like you, Anthony.
Very wise.
Yeah.
Very wise.
That's what it was referring to.
He was
Not
totally
the chubbiness.
I was more talking about the gray beard than anything else.
Oh, that's good.
We had like a live chat, whatever it was last year when we were doing the Undertow thing.
Yeah.
A question came in about doing characters with beards.
Mm.
So I think we'll see some characters.
Yes.
I find inspiration all around me all the time. And I happen to live in a very rural setting where we're shooting here, right here on my farm. I have a variety of just your basic farm animals from pigs to cows and chickens, but I also have bears and deer and raccoons and all of those things I get inspired by. I keep a sketchbook. I generally try to daily do sketches from life. It helps me keep my skills sharp, but at the same time, it's feeding my database of, that's what a cow's nose looks like. Wouldn't that be interesting if I use that mixed with a raccoon?
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, I don't know what happened. It's like I can't even get connected at all now.
Oh, yeah, no problem. That's fine. This works. We can finish up
Okay.
over the phone. So,
Can you describe the source geyser?
yeah, so that is literally just kind of like a source well, like exploding from the ground. So it's kind of like it's
Oh, like
just
Old Faithful.
it's yeah, basically. Yep. It was just, and again, it's just a landmark, a specific landmark that we're trying to give an image for. So
It's going to be on a chip, not a card.
it's just going to be a chip. Yep. So it's pretty small artwork. But I mean, these can be, they don't have to be extremely detailed. This is a fountain kind of, Old Faithful, basically with source. And then,
We're shooting that eerie blue.
yes.
But we need to make it look more like energy than water.
Yep.
When you think of the world as a character designer, it isn't just simply limited to drawing heads and arms and legs. There's a world they live in. So not only that world they live in, but there's a home they live in, there's clothes they put on, there's tools they use, and all of those things become part of that world. We have to design clothing that would work on birds. You have to design some kind of thing that would work on a giant. What would a giant's shirt look like, and where would they get the material to weave a shirt, So you think of these things, whether it enters in the game or not, you're always thinking of these things. Some of this stuff just gets tossed away on the sketch room floor, if you will. But things like clothing and tapestry, I would seek out references, Google Images, of course, and you just look at, historical clothing. Generally, because of the world of Cloudspire, I wouldn't try to do a lot of futuristic fantasy. It would be, retro world, like things that retro's probably not the right world. Fantasy, like Lord of the Rings type.
Josh, what are you thinking when you think of bounty hunter? Describe them.
I'm thinking kind of like a guy or gal with a lot of tools at their disposal. Maybe potentially like cuffs or a net or something that would be a way to kind of capture and like retain that person, take them into
Gotcha.
custody, and
Gotcha.
but kind of a trapper of sorts, but of people. I don't know. I'm just using my words here. Yeah.
Trying to create and design and not just factions, but a universe. You want those factions to be cohesive, like they don't exist in different universes. And the way that we tackle that, or I found that I tackle that, is simply by keeping my color palette the same, keeping the style the same, keeping the level of detail the same, and it just naturally goes together. And I find it exciting because as different as the factions are, you would think that there's no way that bugs could exist with the heirs, but they just do. They work because I've been I kind of dive into that universe myself and just kind of find that's that would naturally be there. That color would naturally be there.
These other ones now are just other versions of a beetle-y type of version, lizard
Yep.
beetle.
Yep.
A little more triceratops like in the head. I used a Komodo dragon basically as a framework. This one breaks a little bit away from lizardy, but I kind of like this one. It looks a
Right.
little more ominous and a little more villainous. And
Yep.
then there's kind of a happy medium there.
Some of my favorite characters that was never made it to the final cut. They are actually there. Are some of the heirs. Now, when I say didn't make it to the final cut, they're not in the game. But if you look through the lore book, you'll see some of these characters. There's one on the heir fortress that I put these. I put the owl and the vulture and some of those early versions in a tree way off in the background. To try to give that fortress some scale, I needed some creatures, and those they made it into that fortress drawing. Speaking to the heirs, when I was working on designing them, what I found was there was a problem that I came across, and that is some of these are going to have to do things with their arms, and birds have wings, and wings don't have fingers and hands. And so how were we going to make birds grabbing things, holding things, interacting with each other without trying to make a feather become a finger? And I was never convinced that a feather could be a finger. So then I started thinking, well, what if they didn't have, maybe they had feet to stand on, and maybe those same type of feet came up at the shoulder level and actually were hands that they could use. And so early versions of the heirs, and I even think it entered into the game. If you look closely, there are some of the heirs that actually have a hand that's holding a sword. I think the Royal Talon has that. So you'll see that. Now that's not true on all of them, but many of them have that. I don't know if you want to say 2 arms and 2 legs or 4 legs, but they have that unique anatomy.
Can you contrast like your Griffin work from TMB with? I mean, because I agree we want it different, but those felt really realistic.
Because they were just heads.
Okay.
So like anytime I can
Yep.
render out, like the falcon and,
Oh, sure.
and the
Yeah.
you can render it out and it looks great. Render out a whole bird, looks great. But then you start putting clothes on a bird,
Right.
putting weapons on a bird.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
And then that's fine almost as long as they retain birdness, more bird. But then you start stretching them into human-esque appearance.
Right.
It's not, at least from my opinion, not as believable.
Yeah.
And begins to go into a more lighter realm.
Mm-hmm.
There's not as much weight or gravitas behind it.
Or it just flat out looks totally
That's the other thing.
bad.
It looks bad.
Yeah. It just doesn't.
Yeah, you got a person with a bird head,
Right.
and that
Right.
is the worst.
Yeah.
The Nerora faction, unlike a lot of the other ones, were unique in that they were completely consumed by the source itself. And so visually, how do you render that? How do you draw energy? How would somebody who was so infatuated with the source worship it, if you will? How would a creature, a being, look? And those early concepts that I had were so different from where we ended up with.
I agree that this. I mean, well, this is really. I really like this, but I liked your first one too.
Yeah.
Where the head was literally apart.
Right. Yeah.
and it was just
And I think
held
that
together.
absolutely is an easy direction to go into.
Uh-huh.
But when I looked at this one, and I loved the rendering of this, I
Yeah.
liked how that's feeling.
Yeah.
But then in the universe of everything else, when
Yeah.
I compare it to the giants and compare it to the
the heirs.
heirs, it doesn't feel like it's in the same universe,
Right.
from my opinion. Whereas that newer one does, just
Mhm.
because there's I don't know.
Yeah. No, I totally see it. Like it makes sense.
Mhm.
They're on more of a similar plane.
Yeah.
In terms of.
And it's not
rendering.
It's not realism. I mean, because
Mhm.
I don't want these to feel cartoony, but at
Right.
the same time, they're not hyper realism.
Right.
I think my early designs, some of my first designs, were super humanoid. They were humans with flesh-colored skin, The only thing I had changed from my basic references was blue energy coming out of their pores of their skin, rupturing skin, some dour looks, some painful expressions, but there wasn't a whole lot of otherworldliness. Ryan had some ideas about exposing some of the back of the neuroras where the source would come out of their backs, and I had a challenge visually to how do you render that when so many of them are front presenting, and so I wasn't able to expose that like I wanted to.
I sent you this one yesterday.
Yes.
Now I've changed him because when I looked at him, and then I looked the one I sent you on Friday. Looked at him again, and then started doing the female version of it, which is what you see on the right. It looked too much like Avatar.
Oh, sure.
So then I changed just enough so that she, on the right, doesn't have that Avatar look.
Sure.
Working with Josh and Adam, they are very creative, and so they have lots of stuff going on inside their brain that other people don't know about. And they will give you little glimpses here and there. We're thinking about this. We're thinking about that. And so as soon as he tells me I'm thinking about this, my brain has to get on board real quick, because if he's thinking about it, that means it's going to develop into something bigger. And so most of the projects take a couple years in development. I'm trying to think about some of the recent projects we've worked on, how long it's taken, and from the early concepts, early logo work to try to just set a tone, to try to set this is our goal, early concept art. It's about 2 years of development. And then we, at times, because the development does get stalled, that project might literally get tabled, and we'll say, okay, it's gone as far as we can go in development. It's gone as far as we can go with art. Here's another thing we're talking about, and then we'll move to the next one. And so right now, I can honestly say, as a team, we probably have 4 projects that are at different stages of development. Some might piggyback over top of another one when we have an order of what we think is the hot item this week. May not be next week.
Awesome.
Right.
Awesome. Let's just keep we got to just keep churning these out. That's so great.
Yeah,
Anthony.
that October date is going to be here.
It's going to come up so fast.